Hi folks, and welcome. This video is going to be about implementing bubble sort. Bubble sort is an algorithm for sorting an array. And if you're wondering, well, why would we write a sorting algorithm when we already have built-in sorting methods in JavaScript? Well, it's an algorithmic challenge. And when it comes to sharpening your coding skills, algorithmic challenges are like a whet stone. So let's jump into it. Okay, so first off, I thought it would be a good idea to give you a visual of what it is exactly that we're trying to implement. So here's a GIF that represents bubble sort. Imagine that this is an array of numbers, and as you can see, they are not sorted. The goal is to get them sorted from lowest to highest values, and let's see how bubble sort would do that. Well, what it does is it compares two numbers, and if the first of those two numbers is greater than the second, it swaps them, and then it compares the next two numbers. It repeats this process all the way through the array until finally it is comparing the last two indices of the array, and then it starts the process over again. After it has done a complete go through of the array, it guarantees that the highest value in that array will be at the very end. So there's no need to check this value again. And so on the second iteration through the array, it doesn't compare the last two anymore. The same goes for the second go through of the array. It guarantees that the second highest value will be in the second last position. And so this process repeats until finally the entire array is sorted. So notice that it has to do fewer and fewer steps as we get closer and closer to sorting the array. And I'm going to definitely let the GIF finish because that would really be mean to just leave you hanging, and not get to see it fully sorted. Voila, there it is. That's what we're trying to implement. So how would we do that in code? Well, I know that we're probably going to write a function. It's probably going to logically be called bubble sort. And it would make sense that it would take an array as an argument, the array that it intends to sort. Okay, so now we need to think about what we saw in that GIF and kind of break it down into tangible steps. Uh, First off, we'll think about that GIF, and we know that we saw it was iterating from index 0, if you're looking at the first of the two red squares, all the way through the second to last index of the array. But then on the subsequent iterations through the array, it was not going as far through the array. It was that distance was decreasing by 1 each time. So you're iterating through an array, that's a for loop, and that for loop is happening multiple times over. So I'm getting loop within a loop vibes from this algorithm. So how about first off, we create a variable for the last index that we want to check. So we'll call this variable last index to check. This will represent the first of the two red squares. And so the last index for that will be the array.length minus 2, because array.length minus 1 would be the final index. We want to only go until the second to last index of the array. And so also I want my algorithm to not continue this process more than it needs to. I want it to return the array if it's sorted and not continue with subsequent iterations. So we need a way to check if the array is sorted. One way to check is, well, has a swap occurred on the most recent iteration? If not, then that means the array is sorted and we don't need to continue any further. So let's make a variable for that. Var swap has occurred equals false. Okay. So while swap has occurred is true, we want to continue checking this array until finally swap has occurred is false. So that sounds like a while loop. So while swap has occurred, continue iterating but I'm initializing swap has occurred as false. So then the way we have it set up here, it's not going to even do this while loop. So, but if I initialized it to true, that would be kind of weird because then I would have to like have another way of keeping track of whether I've done a swap and set it back to false. What I'm thinking is I need to go through the array at least once to check if it's sorted. And that kind of scenario where, oh, I need to do something at least once and then continue doing so an uncertain number of times, that screams a do while loop. So rather than doing a while loop, I am going to do a do while loop, which guarantees to execute the code block at least once and then evaluates the conditional to determine whether or not to continue doing so. And so the way that looks is it's basically an upside down version of this that starts with do. And then we basically just move the code block up to here, like that. So it'll do this, and then while this condition is true, it will continue doing that. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so here's where we're doing our iterations through our array. What's that going to look like? Well, we're going to loop from index 0 until we get to that last index that we want to check. So for loop, for var I equals 0, I is less than or equal to our last index to check, I plus plus. And so inside the loop, what do we have to do? We need to compare the current index that we're at with the next one and determine if a swap is needed. Well, that's pretty straightforward. If the value of array at index I, the current value, is greater than the value at the array of index I plus 1, then we need to do a swap. And we also need to set swap has occurred to true. Because if we do a swap, we certainly don't know that the array is sorted. We need to check again until finally we do a check with no swaps. There is one important detail that I left out, which is that we have to reinitialize swap has occurred to false each time we go through this do while loop, because we're checking for swaps and not assuming we've found one until we do. So it has to be reinitialized as false, otherwise we'll never exit out of this while loop. We'd be looking for swaps and assigning swap has occurred to true, but it already is true, and it would be an infinite loop. So this is a must, and it has to go before the for loop. Okay. So how do we do a swap? Well, if we were to try reassigning the value of the current index to the value of the next index, we would then run into a problem where we're trying to reassign the value of the next index to the previous value because we've already reassigned this one and it's gone. So we need to store the current value of the current index temporarily so that we can reassign this current index, and then we'll have that value stored away for reassigning the next index. I'll show you how to implement that. So we'll create a variable and we'll call it temp, and it will be set to the current index. Then we're free to reassign the current index since we've stowed away that value, and we're going to reassign it to the value of the next index. And so then we reassign the value of the next index to temp, which has the value that the current index originally was. So that takes care of the swap portion. Now we just need to set swap has occurred to true. Okay, so All right, let's sort of go over it again. We're checking the array at least once to check to see if there are any swaps. So we go through that array, and if it's already sorted, this won't happen, and we'll exit the while loop. If we do find a swap that was needed, that guarantees that we're going to check the array at least once more. So if we go through it without finding a swap, that means that this condition will finally evaluate to false, and the array should be sorted. So at that point, we'll be outside of the while loop, the do while loop, and we can just return the array. So, are we ready to test it? I think so. Let's do it. So what we'll do is we'll console log. We'll do 2 test cases. We'll hand it an array of 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we'll do another sort of more random one. And a couple of equal values in there just for fun. Okay, and then I will run this in the terminal. Using Node, when you run JavaScript in Node and run console logs, they will just show up right here in the terminal. And the command for that is not that. It is node, and then the path to the file, the JavaScript file that you're planning to run. There it is. Let's run it. Oh yeah. We have 2 nicely sorted arrays. I don't know why it wraps them to new lines like that. It doesn't perform swaps when the values are equal because it doesn't need to, and we were only checking if values are greater than the next value in the array. But there you have it. That's a sorting algorithm. It was pretty fun. I encourage you to try this on your own. See if you can do it by yourself. Maybe run into problems, maybe not. And then when you're ready for something more difficult, you can check out some of the other sorting algorithms. Bubble sort is one of the simpler ones, but it is less efficient than some of the other sorting algorithms. Bubble sort has, somewhat of a large time complexity, as we call it, but it is a cool challenge, that's for sure. And it's a very simple sorting algorithm. So I hope this inspires you to try out various algorithmic challenges. They can be a lot of fun. They can be frustrating. If you find yourself being frustrated with one, just look up the solution. That's okay. You tried. Look up the solution, read through it, make sure you understand it, and then see if you can do it on your own. And that is part of the learning process. But definitely visit LeetCode, or if you find that those are too hard, Google some, really simple algorithm challenges and just work your way up. It's great fun, and it will definitely improve your coding skills. All right, folks. Happy coding. See you next time.